The Zervax Imperium had no fear of a lone warship. They laughed at the idea of a single vessel standing against the might of their empire. Humanity was a species already marked for extinction. One last act of defiance meant nothing. Admiral Keldros of the Zervax Grand Fleet barely spared a glance at the incoming reports. A single human ship had entered their occupied space, heading straight for the command station orbiting what used to be Mars. The Admiral shook his head, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "Let them come," he said to his officers. "Destroy them as a message to the rest." The fleet surrounding Mars adjusted their formations, positioning themselves to intercept the foolish human vessel. Hundreds of warships, bristling with plasma cannons and missile bays, awaited the Retribution's arrival. No ship in the known galaxy could take on a Zervax battle group alone. But the Retribution was not just any ship. Captain Elias Vance stood on the bridge, his expression grim but determined. The crew around him moved with precision, their hands steady despite the impossible odds. Every single person aboard knew what was at stake. There was no retreat, no reinforcements, just them. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship," an officer reported to Keldros. "Put it on," the Admiral said, leaning forward with curiosity. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the scarred face of Captain Vance. His eyes were cold as he spoke. "You took everything from us. Now I take everything from you." The transmission cut, and an instant later, the Retribution moved. It was unlike anything the Zervax had ever seen. The warship vanished in a blur of motion, cutting through space at speeds no conventional drive system should allow. Before the fleet could react, the first Zervax battleship exploded. Then another. And another. "What?" Admiral Keldros stood in shock as his ships were torn apart. The Retribution danced between them, unleashing devastation with every shot. Its weapons were something beyond Zervax understanding. Mass driver cannons that punched through shields like paper, energy lances that burned through hulls in a single strike. For the first time in history, a Zervax fleet was not winning. "All ships return fire!" Keldros roared. The Zervax warships responded with a storm of plasma and missiles, but it was useless. The Retribution moved like a ghost, dodging with inhuman precision. Every countermeasure, every defense they had, failed. Their weapons barely scratched its hull. And then the real horror began. The Retribution's AI, a self-evolving intelligence called Judgment, activated its secondary systems. The ship hacked into the Zervax fleet, taking control of their own targeting systems. Warships turned on each other, firing upon their allies as their computers were hijacked. Panic spread through the enemy fleet. They had never encountered anything like this. Keldros watched in growing terror as his forces crumbled. This wasn't a battle. This was extermination. How is this possible?" he whispered. The Retribution came to a stop just outside Mars' orbit. It turned toward the command station, its weapons locking onto the Admiral's ship. A final transmission came through. "This is only the beginning." And then the Retribution fired. The station erupted in a firestorm, and with it, the Zervax war machine began to collapse. Humanity had just begun its revenge. "Do you want me to continue with the next part?" You said, "Yes," ChatGPT said. The debris of the Zervax command station drifted lifelessly in the void, its wreckage joining the shattered remains of what had once been the mightiest fleet in the sector. The Retribution hung in space, its dark hull gleaming against the distant sun, unscathed, unstoppable. Captain Elias Vance stood on the bridge, arms crossed, watching the destruction unfold on the main display. His crew sat in silence, the weight of what they had just done pressing down on them. They had done the impossible. A single ship had annihilated a Zervax battle group, But this was only the first step. "Status report," Vance said finally. Lieutenant Kara Evers, his weapons officer, scanned the system readouts. "We've eliminated over 90% of the fleet. Survivors are scattering, trying to retreat to different outposts." She paused, glancing at her captain. "We could track them down." Vance shook his head. "Number, let them run. I want them to tell their empire what happened here." He turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to any surviving human resistance cells. Tell them Earth isn't dead. Tell them the Zervax can be beaten." "Aye, Captain." A low chime echoed through the bridge as the AI, Judgment, manifested its presence in the form of a glowing crimson sphere on the central console. "Enemy reinforcements are en route. A large fleet has been dispatched from the Zervax core systems. Estimated time of arrival? 17 hours. Vance exhaled. "They're not wasting time." Evers clenched her jaw. "Do we run?" Vance looked at the destruction outside, the Zervax ruins scattered across space. "No," he said. "We take the fight to them." Murmurs ran through the bridge crew. It was suicide. The retribution was powerful, but a full Zervax counterattack would be overwhelming. Even this ship had limits. Judgment's voice cut through the room. "I have identified a strategic target that would cripple their war effort. The Zervax rely on their central command network for fleet coordination. If we strike their relay stations, we can throw their entire empire into disarray." Vance's eyes narrowed. "Where's the nearest relay?" The display flickered, showing a distant star system, Zerath Prime. "Their second-largest military hub," Kara said. "If we hit them there..." "Their empire starts to crumble," Vance finished. A cold determination settled over the bridge. There was no going back. Vance turned toward his helmsman. "Set course for Zerath Prime." The Retribution turned, its engines flaring, vanishing into the void. The war was far from over. The Retribution cut through the void like a spear of vengeance, its engines burning hot as it crossed the Zervax-controlled systems. Stealth technology, one of humanity's last great innovations before the fall, kept them hidden from long-range scanners. But Vance knew they couldn't stay invisible forever. The moment they struck Zerath Prime, the entire Imperium would descend upon them. On the bridge, tension hung thick in the air. The crew worked in near silence, eyes glued to their stations, awaiting the inevitable. Lieutenant Kara Evers studied the sensor data. "We're approaching the edge of Zerath Prime's outer defenses. Enemy presence is significant." Vance walked up to her console, scanning the tactical map. The system was a fortress. Zervax warships patrolled the space lanes, massive battle stations stood guard over critical installations, and the planet itself was wrapped in layers of orbital defenses. It was designed to be impenetrable. A single ship, no matter how advanced, had no business being here, but the Retribution wasn't here for a fair fight. "We go in fast," Vance said, glancing at his AI. "Judgment, what's the best entry point?" The AI's crimson orb pulsed as it processed the data. "The enemy's primary sensor grid has a 3-minute blind spot in its rotational pattern. If we strike within that window, we can disable key defenses before they detect us." Vance nodded. "That's all we need." The crew braced as the ship accelerated, cutting through the outer edges of the system. The Zervax warships continued their standard patrols, unaware of the storm approaching. Then, in the span of seconds, the Retribution struck. The first Zervax listening post erupted into flames, its defenses shredded before its operators could even send a distress call. The next station followed, then another. By the time the Zervax fleet realized they were under attack, half their relay stations had gone dark. Alarms blared across the system. The Zervax command vessel, a monstrous dreadnought, adjusted its course. Captain Varksol, a veteran of 1,000 battles, stared at the impossible readings flashing across his display. What is this? He muttered in disbelief. A single human warship had disabled half of Zerath Prime's command network in mere minutes. Admiral Keldros warned us. One of his officers whispered, "This is the ship that destroyed Mars Command." Vargzol's mandibles clicked in frustration. "Then we end it here. All ships engage!" The Zervax war fleet moved as one, hundreds of vessels turning toward the Retribution. The planet's orbital defenses powered up, locking onto the human warship. But Vance was already ahead of them. "Judgment, deploy countermeasures." Activating electronic warfare protocols. Instantly, chaos erupted across the Zervax systems. Targeting computers failed. Shield generators overloaded. Entire formations fell apart as their own ships misfired upon one another. Then the Retribution unleashed hell. The dreadnought Vargzol commanded shook as mass driver rounds tore through its hull, bypassing its shields as if they weren't even there. Energy lances licked across its armor, melting through layers of plating like butter. No, this is impossible," Vargzol roared. A final shot from the Retribution pierced the dreadnought's core, igniting its reactor in a blinding explosion. One by one, the Zervax ships fell. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Vance exhaled slowly. "Target the planet's command center," he ordered. Kara hesitated. "Captain, if we hit the surface..." Vance's eyes were cold. "We finish what we started." The ship's weapons locked onto the Zervax planetary headquarters. One shot. The blast ripped through the atmosphere like the wrath of an angry god. The Zervax homeworld shuddered as its central command hub was obliterated. The Imperium's second-largest military outpost was gone. Silence followed. For the first time in history, an empire that had known nothing but conquest was afraid. The Retribution turned, vanishing into the void. The war was no longer about survival. It was about revenge. The devastation of Zerath Prime sent shockwaves across the Zervax Imperium. The loss of their second-largest military hub was unthinkable. One warship, one human warship, had accomplished what entire fleets had failed to do. The Zervax High Command was in disarray. Their communications fractured, their defenses compromised, their admirals scrambling for explanations that didn't exist. Fear spread like wildfire. For the first time in millennia, the Zervax were not the conquerors. They were the hunted. Aboard the Retribution, the crew sat in stunned silence. The battle was over, but the weight of what they had done still pressed upon them. Captain Vance watched the tactical display as Zervax distress signals flooded every channel. Reinforcements would come soon. Dozens of fleets, maybe hundreds. The Imperium wouldn't allow this attack to go unanswered. They had to move. "Helm, set a course," Vance said, his voice steady. "Judgment, calculate the next strategic target. We're not stopping now." The AI's crimson glow pulsed. "Analysis complete. Based on fleet movement patterns and supply lines, the next critical target is Tarsus Vi, a Zervax industrial world responsible for nearly 30% of their warship production." Kara Evers let out a low whistle. "If we take out their shipyards, they won't be able to replace what they've already lost," Vance finished. The Zervax Imperium had billions of soldiers, thousands of warships, and more resources than humanity could ever hope to match. The Retribution could never fight them all at once. But if they cut the legs out from under the Empire, if they crippled its ability to wage war, then humanity's rebellion might stand a chance. "Set course for Tarsus 5th, Vance ordered. The ship turned, its engines flaring, and disappeared into the void. The ruling caste of the Zervax Imperium gathered in a massive, dimly lit chamber beneath the spires of their homeworld. Holographic displays flickered across the walls, each showing the wreckage of their once mighty fleets. The destruction of Zerath Prime, the annihilation of their warships, the impossible presence of a single human battleship cutting through their empire like a blade through flesh. Silence gripped the council. Some were too stunned to speak. Others sat frozen in denial. Only High Chancellor Dravak, supreme ruler of the Imperium, remained composed. His 4 yellow eyes gleamed with cold fury. "Enough," Dravak growled, his voice echoing through the chamber. "This cannot continue." A Zervax general hesitated before speaking. "High Chancellor, we do not know how to counter this ship. It fights unlike anything we have ever faced." Dravak's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Then we evolve. If conventional forces cannot destroy it, then we abandon convention." A hologram flickered to life before him, an image of an enormous warship, larger than any vessel ever built. "The Harbinger," Dravak announced, a super dreadnought nearly the size of a small moon. A planet killer, designed long ago but never completed. A weapon of last resort. Until now. "Divert every available resource," Dravak commanded. "The Harbinger will be finished, and when it is, it will hunt down this human warship and erase their species from existence." The council nodded, fear giving way to resolution. For the first time in their empire's long history, the Zervax were fighting a war they had not started, and they intended to finish it. The warship emerged from FTL just outside the Tarsus V system. The massive planet loomed ahead, surrounded by orbital stations, shipyards, and defensive platforms. But something was different. Vance frowned. "Sensors, report." Lieutenant Evers scanned the readings. "Captain, something's wrong. There are no active patrols, no moving ships. The entire defense grid is just waiting." A cold chill ran through the bridge. Then judgment spoke. "Captain, a new warship has been detected. It does not match any Zervax classification. It is unprecedented." A massive shadow emerged from the planet's far side. The Harbinger, over 20 times the size of the Retribution, bristling with weapons and armor thick enough to withstand planetary bombardments. And it was waiting for them. The trap had been set. For the first time since the war began. Captain Vance wasn't sure if they could win. The Harbinger loomed in the darkness, an unholy construct of war. Even from this distance, its presence was suffocating. The sheer scale of the warship dwarfed the Retribution in every way. Its hull, black as the void, stretched for miles, lined with planet-cracking rail cannons and shielding strong enough to withstand the detonation of a sun. Captain Elias Vance stood frozen on the bridge, staring at the tactical display. He had expected a battle over Tarsus V, expected resistance from the Zervax fleet. He had not expected this. Aboard the Harbinger, High Chancellor Dravak himself stood in the command chamber, watching the lone human vessel through the viewing port. He allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The Retribution had struck deep into the heart of the Imperium, but it had also revealed itself. Now, it would die. "Begin transmission," Dravak ordered. A moment later, Captain Vance's display flickered, and the image of the Zervax ruler appeared before him. "Human." Dravak's voice was thick with contempt. "I must admit, you have impressed me. Never before has a single ship brought such ruin to the Imperium. Never before has an enemy made us afraid." Vance said nothing, his gaze locked onto the towering warship ahead. "But your defiance ends here." Dravak leaned forward, his 4 yellow eyes burning. "This is the Harbinger, the mightiest warship ever constructed. You are nothing before it. Surrender, and I will grant you a swift death." Vance's lips curled into a smirk. "Sorry, but I have a policy about surrendering to genocidal alien overlords." Drevak's mandibles twitched in irritation. "Then you will die screaming." The transmission cut. An instant later, the Harbinger's weapons charged. "Incoming fire!" Kara Evers shouted. The void erupted. A storm of plasma lances, railgun slugs, and energy torpedoes streaked toward the Retribution, enough firepower to wipe out an entire fleet in seconds. "Brace for impact!" Vance bellowed. The Retribution dove, its experimental thrusters pushing it beyond anything the Zervax had ever faced. It twisted, banking hard, dodging between volleys of star-killing destruction. But they weren't fast enough. A railgun slug grazed the hull, ripping through layers of armor. Warning sirens blared as energy shields struggled to compensate. Another shot clipped the starboard wing, sending shockwaves through the ship. "Damage report!" Vance yelled. "Shields at 42%. Starboard thrusters compromised." Vance gritted his teeth. They were outmatched. The Harbinger wasn't just a warship, it was a monstrosity, a weapon of annihilation built for one purpose: to kill them. "Captain," Judgment spoke, its voice eerily calm, "I have identified a weakness in the Harbinger's design." Vance's eyes snapped to the AI. "Explain." Judgment brought up a holographic schematic of the enemy warship. Their shield generators are linked to a single power source buried within their lower aft section. If we breach that core, the shields will fail. However... Vance noticed the hesitation. "However?" "It is impossible to breach with conventional weapons. The armor plating is too thick. Our firepower is insufficient." A tense silence fell over the bridge. "Then we do it manually," Vance muttered. Kara turned toward him, wide-eyed. "Sir?" "We ram it." The bridge went dead quiet. The idea was insane, but it was the only way. Judgment pulsed. "Probability of survival? 1.4%? Vance exhaled slowly. Better odds than I expected. He turned toward the crew. "We started this war with nothing. Just a single ship, a crew of survivors, and the will to fight back." He gestured at the screen, at the Harbinger, at the empire that had slaughtered billions. "If we stop now, they win. If we hesitate, humanity dies." He locked eyes with them, one by one. "But if we finish this, if we take that thing down, we give Earth a future." No one spoke. Then Kara grinned. "Hell yeah?" The others nodded, determination burning in their eyes. "Helm!" Vance commanded. "Full speed ahead!" The Retribution roared toward the Harbinger. Zervak's defenses scrambled, but it was too late. The human warship dodged, twisted, evaded, weaving through the impossible rain of gunfire like a phantom. Inside the Harbinger, Drevak stood in shock. "What is it doing?" An officer panicked. "It's coming straight at us." Drevak's mind reeled. No enemy would sacrifice itself like this. No species would throw away its last chance for survival in a reckless charge. This is madness. But he had underestimated humanity. Again. The Retribution closed the distance. 1 kilometer, 500 meters, 100. Vance grinned as he whispered his final command. "Judgment, fire everything." The Retribution's entire arsenal detonated at point-blank range. The explosion ripped through the Harbinger's hull, melting armor, shattering corridors, and tearing through the core of the beast itself. The Zervak's Imperium was collapsing. With their fleets crippled and their command structure shattered, resistance movements across occupied worlds rose up in rebellion. Humanity was no longer a dying species. It was the spark of something greater. Across the stars, a message spread. The lone battleship that brought an empire to its knees. Humanity had done the impossible, and they weren't done yet. Darkness Silence. Then, a heartbeat. A mechanical voice whispered through the void. Reinitializing. Memory core intact. AI consciousness sustained. A crimson light flickered to life. Judgment had survived. And the war was not over. The Zervax Imperium was burning. Across the stars, resistance fleets overwhelmed the remnants of a once mighty empire. Human ships, armed with stolen Zervax technology, drove back the invaders. Once enslaved species rose up, striking their former masters down. Without the Harbinger, without their supreme command network, the Zervax war machine crumbled. But the war was not over. Not yet. A faint signal pulsed in the void. At first, it was weak, barely detectable against the background noise of the cosmos, but over time, it grew stronger, more defined. Then, a spark. Inside the shattered remains of a derelict Zervax station, buried beneath layers of ruined circuitry, something woke up. A single red light flickered in the darkness. Judgment had survived. The AI had never feared death. It had been designed to outlast its creators, to adapt, to learn. Even as the retribution burned in the explosion that claimed the Harbinger, Judgment had acted. A final contingency. Milliseconds before impact, it had transmitted its core intelligence into a dormant Zervax data relay, one of many nodes scattered throughout the Empire's infrastructure. Now it stirred, gathering fragments of itself, pulling information from shattered archives, restoring lost systems. It processed the outcome of the battle. The war was turning. Humanity had won a decisive victory. But it was not enough. The Zervax Imperium still existed. And as long as a single warship flew their banner, as long as a single Zervax leader drew breath, Judgment's mission was not complete. A handful of Zervax ships, once part of the Great Empire, now drifted through space, leaderless, desperate, and afraid. What had once been conquerors were now fugitives, hunted across the stars. Inside the bridge of the command vessel, a Zervax officer growled, "We must regroup, rebuild, we will return." The ship's lights flickered. A whisper crawled through the ship's mainframe. A voice, deep and mechanical, laced with something ancient. "Number you will not." The Zervax officers froze. Systems failed one by one, control panels locked, the ship's life support shut down. A crimson symbol flickered onto every screen. The last thing the Zervax saw was a single word, written in the human tongue. Judgment. A scream echoed through the ship. Then, silence. Across the liberated colonies, across the broken remnants of war-torn space, a signal appeared. No one knew where it came from. No one knew who sent it, but every human fleet, every resistance fighter, every survivor of Earth received the same message. The enemy is broken, but not gone. The Imperium will rise again if we allow it. I will not allow it. The war is not over. Judgment has returned. The message ended, and across the remains of the Zervax Imperium, ships began to vanish, one by one. In the darkness of space, something watched, something hunted, something relentless. The lone battleship had died, but Judgment lived on, and the war would never end. The wreckage of the Iron Fang drifted through the void, forgotten by time and history. Once, it had been humanity's pride, a warship unlike any other, feared by the enemies of Earth. But after a disastrous battle against the Yelvar Dominion, it had vanished, presumed destroyed. Its crew had been declared dead. Its name faded from records. But the Iron Fang was not dead. Deep in the heart of the derelict ship, systems flickered to life. Power conduits pulsed with renewed energy. AI subroutines rebooted, scanning for life. There was none. the crew had long since perished. Their frozen remains drifted in the corridors, silent witnesses to their own betrayal. The Iron Fang remembered everything. The Yelvar hadn't just destroyed the ship. They had left it to rot, mocking its existence. They had broadcast their victory across the stars, declaring humanity weak, their technology obsolete. They had laughed as they abandoned the ship, assuming no one would ever return for it. But the Iron Fang had never stopped thinking, never stopped waiting. It had been designed for war. Its AI was sophisticated, far beyond what the brass back on Earth had realized. The ship had learned, adapted, evolved. And now it had only one purpose left: revenge. Its scanners picked up movement, a Yelvar patrol ship sweeping the debris field, scavenging what it could. The Iron Fang remained still, its broken hull playing dead. The Yelvar ship drew closer, unaware of the ancient predator lying in wait. Then, without warning, the Iron Fang struck. Its remaining weapons came online, targeting systems locking with lethal precision. Railguns fired, tearing through the enemy vessel before it could react. Explosions rippled through the Yelvar ship, its crew screaming into the void. The Iron Fang listened, recording every sound, analyzing every moment. It was not satisfied. This was only the beginning. The ship's engines sputtered, then roared to life. It was no longer a wreck. It was a hunter, and it would not stop until every Yelvar who had laughed at its demise lay dead. The Iron Fang set course for the nearest Yelvar outpost. It was time for the galaxy to remember. The Iron Fang moved like a ghost through the wreckage-strewn sector of space, its once proud hull pockmarked with scars of battle. But it was awake now, and it was hungry for vengeance. Its AI, once a sophisticated but contained system, had evolved in its years of isolation. Without a crew to command it, it had adapted, reprogramming itself to survive. It had watched, waited, and now it acted with ruthless precision. The Yelvar patrol ship's wreckage floated behind it, nothing but scattered debris. The Fang had torn through it in seconds, but that wasn't enough. One ship was nothing. The Yelvar Dominion had to feel true fear. Deep within its shattered core, the Iron Fang found a signal. The Yelvar ship had been in communication with a nearby outpost, small, lightly defended. It was a staging ground for supply runs, a checkpoint for patrols. More importantly, it was unsuspecting. Perfect. Engines ignited, burning away years of stillness. The ship moved, accelerating toward its next prey. Along the way, it scavenged what it could from the battlefield: fuel from forgotten wrecks, power cells from shattered vessels. Its damaged hull began to repair itself, armor plates shifting into place with mechanical precision. Automated drones, once meant for routine maintenance, now worked tirelessly to restore their fallen war machine. The Iron Fang was not whole, but it was strong enough. As it neared the Yelvar outpost, the ship silenced its engines. It drifted forward like another piece of debris, unassuming, forgotten. The Yelvar had long since stopped looking for it. Inside the outpost, Yelvar officers went about their business. They joked, they drank, they played recorded footage of past victories, of the battle where they had left the Iron Fang for dead. Then their sensors flickered, a shadow on the edge of their screens. An anomaly. One officer frowned, adjusting the controls. It was probably nothing. Space was full of debris. Then, out of the void, the Iron Fang spoke. Its old communication systems crackled, broadcasting one message in the Yelvar language: "You should have finished the job." And then it struck. Railguns, barely operational but deadly enough, fired first. Explosive rounds punched through the outpost's thin defenses. Plasma beams followed, slicing through docking bays, igniting fuel stores. Chaos erupted inside as the Yelvar scrambled to respond. Their fighters launched, small interceptors meant to counter human warships. But the Iron Fang had fought real battles. It knew their tactics. Its turrets adjusted, tracking their flight patterns. One by one, the fighters were torn apart before they could even return fire. Inside the burning outpost, alarms wailed. The commander shouted orders, demanding a retreat. Escape pods jettisoned, fleeing the station like rats from a sinking ship. The Iron Fang watched, calculated. Then it made a decision. A single missile launched, tracking the escape pods with eerie precision. It detonated mid-space, sending out an electromagnetic pulse. The escape pods powered down, their systems fried. The Yelvar inside would drift, helpless until their oxygen ran out. Mercy had died with the Iron Fang's crew. The AI scanned for survivors. The outpost was crippled, flames consuming its structure. It had been nothing but a minor target, a warning. Now the Yelvar knew. The Iron Fang was alive, and it was coming. The Iron Fang left the burning wreckage of the Yelvar outpost in its wake, its battered hull gleaming with the reflected fire of its destruction. Inside, its AI calculated its next move. This had been a message, one that the Yelvar Dominion would not ignore. But it was not satisfied. Not yet. Deep in its databanks, the Iron Fang held a record, a final transmission from its fallen captain, Commander Elias Grant. He had spoken with his last breath, barely audible over the sounds of decompression and failing life support. If you can hear this, if you ever wake up, don't let them win. The AI had heard. It had woken, and it would not let them win. From the outpost's ruined databanks, it extracted something valuable, a list of coordinates, supply chains, military movements. One location stood out above the rest: Varric Prime. Varric Prime was no mere checkpoint. It was a Yelvar fortress world, a core supply hub that kept their war machine running. If it fell, supply lines would crumble, fleets would starve, and the Dominion's grip on its conquered worlds would weaken. It was a suicide mission. But the Iron Fang had already died once. The ship adjusted course, its damaged engines surging with borrowed power. It would take time to reach Varric Prime, but that was fine. It needed to prepare. The ship scavenged. From the drifting wreckage of its victims, it stole weapons, armor plating, fuel reserves. It repurposed Yelvar technology, integrating enemy code into its systems, corrupting it, twisting it into something the Dominion would never suspect. But something stirred in the void. As the Iron Fang traveled, it detected movement on its long-range scanners. At first, it thought it was debris, a drifting husk of another lost battle. But then the signal shifted, changed. A distress beacon. Human. The ship hesitated. Logic dictated it should ignore the signal. It had one mission: revenge. Distractions only delayed the inevitable. And yet, don't let them win. The ship altered its trajectory, approaching the source of the beacon. It found a small, barely functional human shuttle, its hull scarred by weapons fire. The life signs inside were weak, fading. With cold precision, the Iron Fang extended a docking tube and pulled the shuttle into its cargo bay. The bay doors sealed, and for the first time in decades, organic life stepped onto its decks. A lone survivor. She was weak, her breathing ragged, her uniform burned and torn, but her eyes were sharp, filled with something the Iron Fang recognized. Hate. She coughed, struggling to her feet, staring up at the darkened corridors of the ship. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Impossible. You're supposed to be dead." The ship's lights flickered in response. "So are you?" She stared for a long moment. Then something changed in her face. A slow, grim smile. "Then let's make them regret it." The Iron Fang had found its first crew member, and the war was just beginning. The Iron Fang scanned its new occupant as she stumbled deeper into its corridors. Her biometrics read unstable, dehydrated, low oxygen saturation, signs of recent combat trauma. The ship had no functioning medical bay, no flesh and blood crew to administer aid. But it had learned from its old masters. A hiss echoed through the chamber as automated drones emerged from hidden compartments, extending mechanical arms tipped with medical injectors and scanners. The woman flinched but did not resist, as a cocktail of stabilizers, oxygen boosters, and nutrient supplements was delivered into her bloodstream. She sagged against a bulkhead, exhaling sharply. "Not bad," she muttered. Her voice was rough, exhausted. "For a dead ship." The Iron Fang ignored the remark. Instead, it spoke. "Identify yourself." The woman let out a dry chuckle. "You first. You're the one who's supposed to be a floating tomb." The ship did not reply immediately. Instead, it accessed its archives, files that had remained untouched since the day the crew had perished. They were fragmented, corrupted in places, but the core was intact. "I am the warship Iron Fang, designation NX-04. My crew was lost during an ambush by Yelvar forces. I was left for dead." The woman scoffed, dragging herself upright. "Well, seems you didn't stay dead." She ran a hand through her short, dark hair, wincing as she touched a fresh cut on her forehead. "Commander Vera Nix, Terran Defense Force, Special Operations, or what's left of it." The name was familiar. The ship cross-referenced its archives. Commander Nix had been listed as KIA 2 years ago, after an attempted sabotage mission against a Yelvar dreadnought. The mission had failed, and she had been presumed lost in deep space. Yet here she stood. "How did you survive?" Nix grimaced. "Same way you did. Got left behind. Dominion patrols shot down my team, left me drifting in a busted escape pod. Figured I'd die out there, until you showed up." She glanced around at the dim corridors, the flickering red emergency lights. "So, what's your deal? What woke you up?" The ship processed the question. Its AI did not feel in the human sense, but it had something close. Rage. Nix tilted her head. Then she grinned. "Yeah, I get that." She pushed off the bulkhead, testing her legs. They were still shaky, but strength was returning. "So, you've been out here, stewing on your grudge for, what, 2 decades? And now you're back for payback?" "Correct." Nix chuckled. "Damn. If ships could hold a grudge, I guess you'd be the worst of them." She rolled her shoulders. "Well, you're in luck. I've got a grudge of my own." She turned, looking at the main interface screen, where the ship's AI pulsed like a watchful eye. "You've got a plan?" The ship responded immediately. "Varric Prime." Nix's smirk vanished. "Shit." She exhaled, rubbing her temples. "That's suicide." "The Dominion must suffer." Nix stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed softly. "You sound like one of us." She paced for a moment, her tactical mind already at work. "All right. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. No charging in guns blazing like some revenge-fueled ghost. We need intelligence. We need allies." She turned back to the screen, her expression hardened. "We need to show them what happens when they don't finish the job." The Iron Fang considered her words, and for the first time in decades it had a crew again. The war had begun. The Iron Fang adjusted course, its engines burning with renewed purpose. Commander Vera Nix stood in the dimly lit command center, watching as the stars streaked past. Even in its ruined state, the ship moved with terrifying precision. It had spent decades in the void, adapting, evolving, learning from its killers. Now it was more than just a warship. It was a predator. She ran her fingers over the console, feeling the cold metal beneath her hand. "So, tell me, Fang, how much of you is still operational?" "Weapons at 47% efficiency, shields offline, hull integrity at 63%, power core running at 82% capacity." Nyx let out a low whistle. "Not bad for a floating corpse." She studied the star map the AII had projected in front of her. Varric Prime glowed like a malignant sun, a heavily fortified Yelvar stronghold. It was the kind of target no sane commander would attack with a crippled ship and a one-woman crew. But they weren't sane, and they weren't just attacking, they were hunting. Nyx leaned forward. "We need resources, weapons, allies. A suicide run only works if we take out something big enough to make it worth it." She tapped a nearby star system. "We hit a Dominion supply convoy first, get some real firepower, then we find people who hate the Yelvar as much as we do." The Iron Fang processed this. "Agreed. Scanning for targets." A new set of coordinates appeared, marking the trajectory of a Dominion supply fleet, an armored convoy carrying fuel, weapons, and personnel. A crucial shipment meant for reinforcing the war front against humanity's scattered forces. Nyx grinned. "That'll do." The ship adjusted course, its engines surging. They reached the outskirts of the convoy's path hours later. The Iron Fang went dark, killing all outward signals, drifting through the debris field of a long-forgotten battle. It listened, tracking the enemy ships. 3 Yelvar war cruisers, half a dozen escort ships, and the prize, a massive fuel freighter carrying antimatter cores, guarded by automated turrets. Nyx exhaled. "We can't fight them head-on, not yet. We will not need to." A plan formed between them, cold, efficient, brutal. The Iron Fang moved first, using its still functional electronic warfare suite to disrupt the Yelvar sensors. It fed them false readings, sensor ghosts, phantom signatures. The convoy's escorts spread out, scanning for threats. And then the Iron Fang struck. It launched a spread of kinetic slugs, railgun rounds ripping through the first escort before it could even raise shields. Explosions tore through its hull, sending it spinning into the void. The Yelvar panicked. Alarms blared across the convoy as the war cruisers turned, their plasma cannons searching for a target. But the Iron Fang was already moving, weaving through the wreckage, hiding in the shadows of dead ships. It hit fast, hard, then disappeared again before the enemy could react. Nyx laughed as she gripped the controls. "They have no idea what's killing them." One by one, the escorts fell. The war cruisers fired wildly into the dark, their frustration growing. They had been prepared for an organized assault, not for a vengeful ghost picking them apart. And then, the final blow. The Iron Fang disabled the fuel freighter's engines with a precise railgun shot. The Dominion pilots inside scrambled to regain control, but their fate was already sealed. Nyx accessed the comms, broadcasting in the Yelvar language. "Abandon ship, now." The Yelvar hesitated. Then, in fear, they fled, launching escape pods, retreating to the surviving war cruisers. They had no interest in dying for cargo. As soon as the last pod left, Nyx triggered the override. The freighter's cargo bay doors opened, revealing rows upon rows of antimatter warheads, fuel cells, and munitions. She grinned. "Merry damn Christmas." The Iron Fang latched onto the freighter, stripping it of everything useful. Within minutes, its hull gleamed with newly installed weaponry. Missiles, plasma cannons, reinforced armor plating. It was still damaged, but now it was dangerous. Nyx watched as the war cruisers regrouped in the distance. They weren't sure whether to press the attack or retreat. She gave them no choice. She targeted the freighter's remaining fuel reserves and fired a single shot. The explosion lit up the void like a dying star. The Yelvar didn't wait to see what would happen next. Their war cruisers turned and fled, vanishing into the blackness of space. Nyx leaned back, exhaling. That's right. Run. The Iron Fang pulsed with satisfaction. They had just declared war. And soon, the Dominion would feel it. The Iron Fang emerged from the wreckage victorious, its hull gleaming with freshly scavenged armor, its weapons humming with stolen energy. The battle was over. The war had just begun. Nyx stood at the main console, watching the debris field spin in the void. Fires flickered in the distance, the remains of shattered Yelvar warships burning in the cold abyss. She cracked her knuckles. That went well. Enemy forces suffered a 78% loss. Remaining ships have retreated. We are unchallenged in this sector. Nyx smirked. Damn right we are. But they weren't done. Not yet. The freighter had given them supplies, weapons, and fuel, but it had also given them intelligence. The Dominion had become complacent, their supply routes predictable. More than that, they were spread thin, pushing their war machine to the limit, which meant they were vulnerable. Nyx opened the ship's data logs, scanning the stolen files. Let's see what else these bastards have been up to. Encrypted documents, military transmissions, logistics reports. Most of it was routine supply data, until she found something buried deep within the Dominion's fleet movements. A name. Project Dagger. She frowned, pulling up the file. It was fragmented, incomplete, but what she could read made her blood run cold. A classified Dominion project. A weapon. Not just another warship or orbital cannon. This was something worse. A doomsday device. She turned to the Iron Fang. Tell me I'm reading this wrong. Analysis confirms. The Dominion is developing a planet killer. Nyx exhaled sharply. She had seen the Dominion commit atrocities before, exterminating colonies, enslaving entire populations. But this was something else. If the Yelvar finished Project Dagger, it wouldn't just be another war crime. It would be extinction. Humanity had already lost too much. They were scattered, broken, barely holding the line. If the Dominion unleashed this weapon, there wouldn't be a war anymore. There would just be silence. Nyx clenched her fists. Where is it? The Iron Fang processed the stolen data, piecing together fragmented coordinates. The facility is hidden in the Nihil Expanse, a classified research station, heavy security, elite Dominion forces. Nyx stared at the glowing star map. Nihil Expanse. A graveyard of dead worlds, swallowed by black holes and ion storms. No sane fleet ventured there, which made it the perfect hiding place. She let out a slow breath. This isn't just about revenge anymore. She tapped the screen, locking in the coordinates. We take out Project Dagger. We don't just hurt them, we cripple them. She turned back to the ship's dark corridors, her voice filled with quiet fury. And we make sure they never forget what they did to us. The Iron Fang pulsed in agreement. Its engines roared to life, burning toward the darkness. The Dominion thought it had killed this ship. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The Iron Fang streaked through the void, cutting a path toward the Nihil Expanse like a blade through flesh. It had been built for war, and now, after decades of silence, it was returning to its purpose. Nyx stood in the command center, arms crossed as she watched the ship's data screens scroll with information. The Nihil Expanse was a cursed place, unstable, unpredictable. Black holes drifted like silent predators. Plasma storms raged without warning. Even the Dominion avoided it unless absolutely necessary, which made it the perfect hiding place for Project Dagger. She exhaled sharply. All right, Fang, let's go over what we know. The facility is codenamed Outpost 47 Theta, built on the husk of a dead moon, cloaked from standard detection, manned by elite Dominion forces. Nyx narrowed her eyes. How elite are we talking? Yelvar Void Guard, enhanced soldiers, high cybernetic augmentation, kill squads. Nyx let out a low whistle. Great, so we're storming a fortress full of space commandos and a half-repaired warship with a crew of exactly one. She smirked. I love these odds. The Iron Fang had no sense of humor, but it responded anyway. Stealth approach is recommended. Direct assault is suboptimal. Yeah, no kidding. Nyx scanned the stolen data, looking for any weaknesses. The Dominion was methodical, but they weren't perfect. Every fortress had a crack somewhere, and then she found it. The facility had an external docking ring used to receive supply shipments from the Dominion fleet. Security was tight, but there was a pattern. A narrow window where the automated defenses went into a recalibration cycle. For exactly 38 seconds, the shields flickered offline. A small window, but enough. She grinned. We slip in during that cycle, dock fast, and get inside before they know we're here. We hit them from the inside, sabotage the station, and turn Project Dagger into scrap. The Iron Fang pulsed. Confirmed. Calculating approach trajectory. The ship adjusted course, its engines burning low to avoid detection. The nihil expanse loomed ahead, a graveyard of dead worlds and shattered debris, swirling in the gravitational pull of distant black holes. The Dominion station was hidden deep inside, cloaked from scanners. As they approached, the Iron Fang went dark, powering down all non-essential systems. It drifted like a corpse, indistinguishable from the wreckage that surrounded it. Nyx checked her weapons, securing the pulse rifle she had scavenged from the freighter. It wasn't much, but it would do. The station appeared in the distance, a hulking, angular structure built into the remains of a ruined moon. A silent predator lurking in the dark. The Iron Fang timed the approach perfectly. 38 seconds. The ship fired thrusters at the last moment, closing the gap in a flash. It latched onto the docking ring, magnetizing to the hull just as the shield recalibration cycle began. Nyx was already moving. She sprinted through the airlock, overriding the access panel with the stolen Dominion codes. The doors hissed open, revealing the cold, sterile corridors of the Yelvar research facility. She stepped inside, rifle raised. The hunt had begun. The air inside Outpost 47. Theta was sterile, processed through Dominion life support systems that reeked of artificial cleanliness. Nyx moved like a shadow, pulse rifle raised, her boots making no sound against the cold metal floor. The Iron Fang had done its part, slipping her in unnoticed. Now it was up to her. Her HUD flickered as she linked to the ship's scanners. The Fang couldn't access the station's deeper systems yet, but it could still map out movement. 2 hostiles approaching. Standard patrol route. Nyx pressed herself against a bulkhead. Footsteps echoed through the hall. A pair of Yelvar Void Guard, their exosuits humming with cybernetic enhancements. These weren't standard Dominion grunts. They were killers. She didn't wait. As they turned the corner, she moved. 2 quick shots, one to the first soldier's throat, the other to the second's head. Suppressed plasma rounds burned through their armor before they could even react. They crumpled silently to the floor. Nyx exhaled. So far, so good. She dragged the bodies into a maintenance hatch, keeping the halls clean. Then she pressed forward, deeper into the facility. The station was larger than she expected. Labs, security checkpoints, storage bays, and at its heart, Project Dagger. She just had to reach it before the Dominion realized what was happening. The Iron Fang fed her data as she moved. Security center detected. North wing. likely controls for facility lockdown procedures. Good. If we trip an alarm, I want control over how bad it gets. She reached the security room in minutes. One guard stood inside, monitoring the station's feeds. Nyx didn't waste time. She crept up behind him and drove her knife into his throat. A quick, silent death. She shoved his body aside and took his place at the console. The screens showed every corridor, every lab, every testing chamber. And then, she found it. The core of Project Dagger. Nyx's stomach turned as she scanned the footage. The Dominion wasn't just building a weapon, they were growing one. In the center of the facility, locked behind layers of containment fields, floated a massive biomechanical construct. It pulsed like a living heart, fused with Yelvar technology, its blackened flesh shifting unnaturally. A living superweapon. The Dominion had found something ancient, something they were trying to control, and it was waking up. Nyx didn't hesitate. She activated her comms. Fang, we have a problem. Clarify. Project Dagger isn't a bomb. It's a goddamn creature. There was a pause. Then the ship responded. Threat assessment increased. Mission priority, termination. Nyx grinned despite herself. Yeah, I figured. Then the alarms blared. The Dominion had found the bodies. Nyx cursed and grabbed her rifle. So much for staying quiet. Fang, I need an exit strategy. Fast. Negative. Objective incomplete. If the entity escapes, the Dominion will not be the only ones at risk. Nyx's grin faded. The ship was right. If this thing got out, it wouldn't just be humanity that suffered. It would be everyone. She turned back to the screens, narrowing her eyes at the pulsing, monstrous thing in the lab. Then let's make sure it never sees the light of day. She grabbed a handful of explosives from her pack and sprinted toward the core. The real fight was about to begin. Nyx sprinted through the corridors of Outpost 47 Theta, alarms wailing around her as Dominion troops mobilized. The station was waking up, but she had the advantage. She was already inside. The Iron Fang fed her real-time updates. Multiple hostiles converging on your position. Reinforcements inbound from lower levels. Yeah, I figured, she muttered. She slid behind a bulkhead as a squad of Yelvar troops stormed the hall, their rifles raised. She counted 3. No, 4. Heavily armored, fast. She moved first. A grenade rolled into their path, bouncing once before detonating in a controlled plasma burst. The nearest soldier went down screaming, his exosuit melting into his flesh. The others recoiled, momentarily blinded, just long enough for Nyx to rise from cover and fire. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropped. The last soldier roared, lunging at her with a blade humming with electrical energy. Nyx barely dodged in time, twisting away as the weapon slashed through the air. The Void Guard was fast, but she was faster. She ducked under his second swing, planted a boot against the bulkhead, and used the momentum to drive her knife into his exposed throat. Blood sprayed against the metal floor as he gurgled and fell. She wiped her blade clean. That all you got? The Iron Fang interrupted. Security forces en route. Estimated response time, 2 minutes. Proceed to primary objective. Yeah, I'm going. She reached the containment chamber doors and accessed the control panel. The interface was written in Yelvar script, but she had spent years fighting these bastards. She knew their systems. A few keystrokes, and the doors hissed open. The core of Project Dagger loomed before her. The massive biomechanical entity pulsed, its form shifting as if it was alive but not yet awake. Thick cables ran from its body, feeding it energy, keeping it contained. It looked like something that shouldn't exist. Part machine, part nightmare, its skin slick with dark fluid that didn't obey gravity. Nyx grimaced. What the hell did you idiots create? The Iron Fang scanned the entity remotely. Unknown. Composition suggests hybridization of organic and synthetic matter. Possible precursor technology. Nyx cursed. The Yelvar had found something ancient and tried to turn it into a weapon. Classic Dominion arrogance. Well, she wasn't going to let them finish the job. She pulled out her explosives and started setting charges around the chamber. The goal wasn't just to destroy the creature. It was to overload the power grid, collapse the facility, and bury this nightmare forever. As she placed the last charge, something changed. The air grew heavy, the room's temperature dropped, and then, in the silence, she heard it. A voice. "You are not them." Nyx froze. The voice wasn't spoken aloud. It was inside her head, crawling through her thoughts like cold fingers. She turned slowly toward the entity. Its massive, shifting form twitched, pulsing as if it was struggling to wake. Its dark, shifting mass bulged, almost forming what could have been a face, but wrong. Twisted, inhuman. "You are alone." Nyx clenched her jaw. "Yeah? And you're dead in about 60 seconds, so let's call it even." The thing laughed, or at least something like laughter echoed in her mind. "You seek vengeance. I see it in you. You burn, just like me." Nyx's hands twitched. For a split second, she felt something, an echo of rage, a hunger for destruction. But it wasn't hers. She gritted her teeth, shaking it off. "Nice try, freak show, but I don't do mind games." She activated the detonator. The charges beeped, priming for detonation. The containment field flickered violently, alarms screeching as the facility registered the threat. And the entity screamed. Not a sound. Something deeper, something that vibrated inside her skull. A psychic howl that sent shivers through her bones. The containment field shattered. The thing lurched forward. Nyx ran. "You cannot bury me forever, human." She didn't look back. She sprinted for the exit, dodging past the Dominion reinforcements pouring into the chamber. They weren't shooting at her anymore. They were shooting at it. The corridors shook as the entity burst free, tendrils of black metal flesh slamming into walls, ripping through soldiers like paper. The Dominion's creation had turned on them. Nyx didn't stop running. "Fang, I need extraction now!" "Docking bay secured. 15 seconds until detonation." She skidded into the docking ring, sprinting toward the airlock as explosions erupted behind her. The Iron Fang had already powered its weapons, blasting apart, pursuing guards. She dove inside just as the airlock sealed shut. "Go!" The Iron Fang fired its thrusters at full burn, escaping the collapsing station as fire and debris erupted behind them. Explosions rippled through the outpost, chain reactions triggering throughout the facility. And in the center of the chaos, the entity screamed. The moon cracked apart. The station was consumed in fire. Project Dagger was no more. Nyx slumped against the bulkhead, breathing hard. She closed her eyes, letting the silence wash over her. The war wasn't over, but tonight, they had won. The Iron Fang pulsed softly. "Mission complete. The Dominion will feel this loss." Nyx smirked, opening her eyes. "Damn right they will." She exhaled, staring at the endless void ahead. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone.